Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of So Not Scary. In today's episode, we are going to take a look at how we're going to make the front neckline of our tunic top that we're making. So let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, let me quickly say that I too am a beginner at sewing clothes like a lot of you are. I did a lot of research before choosing to use this particular method of making the front neckline. You might not agree with me, but as a beginner, you will certainly get some idea of where to start your sewing journey. Also, you will learn from my mistakes. So by the end of this video, you will have a fair idea of how to create the front neckline of the top that you're sewing, and you will realize that it's not scary at all. So let's get on with it. I started off by taking the top and measuring the width and the diagonal depth of the top. One thing that I will mention here, and I do apologize for that, is that in the original tunic top measurements PDF that you must have downloaded here, I forgot to mention these measurements. So these two measurements you need to add on to it or replace them. I will be putting up a revised PDF and link to it down below, where you have to basically measure out the width and the diagonal depth of your neckline. Next, I took a bit of fusible interfacing, folded it in half, and made a mark along the fold, and then using my quilting ruler, dropped a vertical on that mark. This will be the top of our neckline. And now, using the width measurement, I reduced it by 1/2 inch and then folded it in half. And then I used this to mark the half width of my neckline that I'll be cutting out. There it is. And now I measured out the diagonal depth of my neckline and marked that out on the fold, like so. Following which, along this point and the top point, I dropped vertical lines using my quilting ruler. So essentially we're making a perfect rectangle. There we go. That's the bottom of our neckline. And then there is the side of our neckline. So there's our rectangle. Now on my ruler I measured out 2 inches, and I'll be marking out 2 inches from the bottom corner of the neckline. So 2 inches up and 2 inches horizontally as well. There. And then I split up this rectangle's corner into an exact half and then drew that halfway point. And then on that halfway mark line, I marked out 1 inch, okay? There's my 1 inch mark. And then I connected all these dots to make a smooth curve. So 2 inch, 1 inch, and then 2 inches again. And that'll give me a nice smooth curve to work with. Next, I measured out 1 inch using my measuring tape and worked all the way around that curve. And then using a pair of sharp scissors, I cut out the fusible interfacing along both the inner and the outer curves. And in this manner, I have my perfect fusible interfacing neckline cut out. I took a piece of fabric and folded it in half. I made 2 marks on either side of the midline of this fabric to demarcate the width of the neckline. Now, using my fusible interfacing, I aligned it perfectly along those marks, and then using a hot dry iron, I fused the interfacing onto the fabric, and this will become the internal facing for the front neckline. Now I did a rough cut around the outer edge of the fusible interfacing, leaving about 1 inch of fabric all around. I also folded it in half again and made a little snip there to help me remember where the midpoint is. And that's what it looks like. Okay, there it is. Next, I took out my set of threads. I bought this new 100% recycled Gutermann thread, and I just really was itching to use this thread, so I chose this beautiful red color for sewing. So this is a beautiful red Gutermann thread that I'll be using. Although in hindsight I realized that a white thread would have been better because the fabric background is white and red is standing out way too much. Time to do some sewing now, and now I have to sew a straight stitch all along the inner edge of the fusible interfacing. So I used my mini sewing machine to do just that, and this was fairly easy. I just aligned the right edge of my presser foot with the inner edge of the fusible interfacing and going nice and slow, turning carefully along the tighter parts of the curve. I just simply sew a straight line. There it is, and then I pressed down on my stitch line using a hot steam iron, and we'll be doing this at every step of sewing anyway. Now I have to fold the outer edge of the fusible interfacing, or rather the fabric around it, and then sew it down. And here I realized my mistake, that the fusible interfacing I was using was way too thin. So one takeaway for you is to match the weight of your fusible interfacing with the weight of your fabric. My fabric was a really good quality medium weight cotton. I should have used a heavier fusible interfacing, which I didn't, so I struggled here trying to find the point where the fabric curves over. But eventually I got through with it, and there it is. Now, using a pair of sharp scissors, I trimmed away the extra fabric, and this was a very quick and easy process. And remember, we are pressing our stitch line after every bit of sewing. So there it is. I've cut it all out, and that's what we're left with. Now I took the front panel of my tunic top and I matched the center point, or the central line, with the midpoint of the facing we've just created. So I matched the notches together and I matched the folds together, and I used some tailoring pins just to anchor these two pieces together really quickly. And now we have to do a bit of rough stitching. So I'm going to sew a straight stitch all the way down that middle fold line, making sure I do not sew over the interfacing. So falling just short of the interfacing, I stop sewing to anchor everything together. And now I'll be sewing just along the inner edge of the interfacing, attaching the facing to the front panel. Again, this time I have to go really nice and slow, taking my time to lift the presser foot and turn carefully along the tight curves. If you go slow, it's easy, and soon enough I was done. There it is. And now, using a pair of sharp scissors, I cut away the extra fabric on the inside of the neckline, leaving about a 1/4 inch. And we will be using this 1/4 inch fabric to make little nicks running up to the stitch line, but never snipping through it. And these nicks will help us turn the facing over to the inside very easily and smoothly. So there it is. Now we turn this in, and what I was left with was a nice smooth front neckline that I had to press out. So I gave it a good press, and now using a needle and a single strand of white thread, I did an invisible stitch all along the outer edge of the facing. And if you don't know how to do an invisible stitch, comment down below and I'm going to show it to you in great detail. But it's very, very easy, and the idea is that you cannot see on the front what you've done to attach or lay the facing flat behind the front panel. So this was a really quick, really easy process, and before long I was done. There it is, the finished neckline, and I think it turned out fabulously neat. I wasn't expecting it to be this neat, to be honest, and you cannot see the invisible stitching at all. See, you can only see it at the back. There it is. I hope you found today's video helpful, guys, and that you learned from my mistakes. I hope you learned something and that you've got something to take home with you so that you can start working on your tops. In the next video, we are going to take a look at how to work on the back neckline of this tunic, and then how to put the front and the back panels together so that we can start working on the sleeves.
If you found this useful, please do hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, and I shall see you guys soon. Bye!